Good afternoon and welcome to NCASS live broadcast. I believe we're on number 15 of the NCASS webinars. And today, my name's Mark, and today I am joined by the legend that is Robert, NCASS chairman, founder of NCASS, been in the game as long as anyone can remember, really. Godfather of the industry, described by many. So yeah, we're very, very lucky to have Bob here. Quite, as some of you know, he's kind of semi-retired, and so spends a reasonable amount of time, a fair amount of time, relaxing in Spain with his lovely wife. But he's currently currently trapped in the UK with us. But he's very kindly agreed to come in and talk to us about his journey, really, his story, and especially at the moment when we're seeing massive upheaval. Reports of economic concerns and a recession, an official recession being declared last week. Obviously, a lot of talk of the hospitality industry and other sectors being affected by large-scale redundancies and things like that. So it seems very unsettled times and uncertain times for some. But obviously, it can be helpful to kind of speak to someone who's been there and done that and has fought through recessions in the past and come out smelling the roses. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Bob. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Unfortunately, in the next room, we can't be in the same room for distancing and echo reasons. But how are you doing today, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Mark. And thank you for the invitation. It's a bit weird being back in the office here. I haven't been here for a good few months now, so it's a bit strange. But yeah, it's good to be back.
Excellent. And so I've been asked to kind of take, to tell your story or to help you kind of tell your story. But I'm not allowed to mention Amsterdam, I believe.
What happens in Amsterdam stays in Amsterdam, Mark. You know that.
Oh yeah, to be fair, Bob did nothing wrong in Amsterdam. So what I probably will bring you back to something we did just slightly outside Amsterdam, which is the Talking Day Music Festival. We're going to come back to that probably a little bit later on. But yeah, let's kind of crack on with how you got started, really, because you weren't a caterer or a chef by trade, were you? What was your first kind of introduction to catering, and in your case, mobile catering?
Oh gosh, how long have we got? I'll try and boil it down to 2 or 3 minutes. Right, I trained as an engineer at a local company called MEM, did a technical apprenticeship, and went through all the college stuff. I was a useless engineer, so I decided that wasn't the right thing to do. So I got married, we emigrated, went to Australia, got into sales. After 3 years, we came back, and then carried on sales career. By the time I was 30, I was a sales director of a PLC involved in the shop fitting industry, and I got a bit frustrated with the management team there and decided I could do it myself even better, which we did. We set up a company based here in the Midlands. We got some really good blue chip clients, built it up to about 3 million turnover, and the day before my 40th birthday, I went bust. Mainly not because of anything we'd done wrong, but it was the start of the recession, the big recession, the last big recession. And 2 of my clients went bust on me for 250 grand. And yeah, that was that. And so, you're a desperate situation, 3 kids, a mortgage, no car. And what the hell do you do? And a friend or a neighbor, really, I can't even say it was a friend at the time, had got a mobile catering unit, which he wasn't using anymore. And he said to me, look, if you're really stuck and you can't pay the mortgage, there's an industrial estate down the road. Here's a catering van. Go and use it. And my wife had always been in catering. And so that's what we did. We literally got up one morning at 6 o'clock, took this trailer, towed it down with an old Ford, I can't remember what it was now, an old Ford car, towed it down to this industrial estate and started doing bacon butties at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I can remember the first day, I think we turned over about 25 quid, but within 3 months we were doing average 150, 200, 250 on a Friday, probably £400 a day. And it became a really good business. And then I got to know another guy who happened to be the chairman of NCASS's predecessor, a guy called Roy Norris, sadly no longer with us. And he said that one, he got a lot of events that he needed caterers for, because he used to be a caterer and wasn't doing it any longer. And he was also chairman of an existing organisation called MOCA, the Mobile and Outside Caterers Association. And they were in a bit of trouble, to be fair. They weren't doing it themselves. It was run by a secretariat in London. They'd run up a big overdraft, which they were all personally liable for, and asked me if I'd come and take a look at it. And I worked for them for nearly 12 months from his office in Alton here in Birmingham, after leaving the trailer at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I worked for them for free for a good few months, and then they got them out of debt, basically. And then he asked me if I wanted to run it. And that's how it all started, and that is 25 years ago. My God, I'm that old. Oh,
I mean, so with regards to, actually starting in catering, because it wasn't your first choice necessarily. You kind of fell into it. Obviously, Jean, your lovely wife, was a skilled chef or caterer. But how did it feel kind of making that move? Because obviously you've had that massive disappointment. You've had to pick yourself up from that, and there's going to be a lot of people out there that are currently possibly going through that disappointment, or looking at that disappointment possibly coming their way. With redundancies or things like that.
Yeah, I totally get it. And how did I feel? Well, a little bit embarrassed, I have to be honest, at first. But within a couple of days, it was brilliant. The pressure was off. The punters were lovely. It was nice to have cash in my hand. I hadn't had cash in my hand for ages. It was just a really, really nice experience. It was smelly, and every time you went home, all you could smell was bacon butties and burgers and stuff. But at the same time, it was a really, really enlightening experience. And then when we got to do events on the weekend, it was just amazing. We absolutely loved doing events, not big stuff. I learned very quickly that the big stuff never paid me. Every time I did a big job, I lost money on it. But we just loved it. It was just, people were so friendly. And the kids got involved, and the youngest one was probably Alan at that stage. Now the MD of this place, and he was probably around 10 when that was happening. Yeah, so we used to have them out the back peeling onions, and we were in there cooking away.
Obviously, the rules on child labour were very different 25 years ago. But no, it's definitely would have it would have been a great experience for all your kids, really, I'd imagine. What was the difference between, and what helped you what moved you into events? Where did that sort of leap come from?
Well, as I said, I got to know this guy called Roy Norris, who's sadly no longer with us, but he had the contract for Birmingham Events team at the time, and he was a great help to us. I don't know where we'd have been without him, to be honest. Again, it was all part of this friendly arrangement that caterers seem to have with one another. And it was him that started us up on small events at Birmingham. We started off on very tiny stuff. But, I remember the first big one we did in Centenary Square, which is not an event space, I don't think, anymore. But in those days it was, and it was a local radio relaunch. And we got there at like 6 o'clock in the morning, set up, because you had to do everything before they did a road closure. And I can remember well that by 9 o'clock, as we opened the hatch, there was a queue about 30, 40, 50 yards long, too deep. And we thought, oh, you know what, we haven't got enough food here. And I went scootering off over to the cash and carry on about 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning to try and get more gear, because we were just absolutely bombarded from the minute the hatch opened until about 5. No, it was probably about 8 o'clock at night by the time the event finished, the gig finished. It was, I can't say anything. It's hard work. Catering, doesn't matter what branch of catering you're in. My wife had sandwich bars, and I've helped in that. She had sandwich bars for about 15, 20 years. And we've had restaurants. We had a coffee shop in Euston Station in London, a waffle shop. We've had a pretty much go at everything over the years, but it's always hard work. And the biggest problem is, as you grow, is getting good labour. Labour is really always the biggest issue.
Absolutely. Would you? You've obviously been involved in lots of different sort of catering enterprises. Would you say it's kind of quite addictive? You kind of get the bug for it, and you know, once you get that feeling for making money out of food, that you kind of stick
Yeah,
to.
it's a strange thing. You start off with one thing, and somebody sees you, and if you're any good, they tend to say, "Well, can you do this? You know, can you do a buffet for us? Can you do a barbecue for us? Can you? Well, I've got this, you know, this space I need somebody to fill. Would you do that?" And it just seems to, once you get into it, it seems to snowball somehow, and that seems to be very, very common. And the thing to do is to try and keep control of it, because it's very tempting to sometimes grow too big too fast. I did that with the coffee and waffle shop we had at Euston Station. 3D, same as I did with the shop fitting business in a way, and you know, it didn't end up particularly well at the end of the day.
So I think that's an interesting point. You know, people, especially if you have a good year, you know, people will be inclined to think, right, I've cracked it, I've nailed it, I know what I'm doing, I've got good events,
Yeah,
you know, I've got the right team behind me, and then they scale it up or try and scale it up in one way or another, and it can get really hairy pretty quickly.
yeah.
Have you got any advice for people sort of on that path?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you need to be very careful on this scaling, particularly if you're making a move from something mobile into fixed site, because all of a sudden you're going from, you know, fairly low overheads to significant overheads, and the pressure can be quite horrendous at times. I remember when we had one of the sandwich bars, a competitor opened up down the road, with a posher place than us, more seating than us, and then Sainsbury's opened, and then Boots opened, and they were all doing sandwiches, and the pressure was absolutely astronomical. And we were only on about a 10 grand a year lease. It was nothing special, but it was it's just pressure you don't need. You know, you need to, if you're scaling, it needs to be done very carefully, especially in times like this. There are amazing opportunities at the moment, but there are also some pretty big pitfalls.
I think, you know, especially with fixed site as well, is, as you said earlier, staff is such a critical thing for hospitality. And you know, you're far more reliant on staff in a fixed site premises. You could make a, you know, a small trailer work for, you know, a mum and pop business if you like. But you know, as soon as you're going into coffee shops and you need to be open 7 days a week, or you
Yeah,
know, you need to flex that rent, don't you? You need to make money,
yeah.
and you're dealing with staff. I mean, how problematic is that? You know, and you know how.
Oh, it's horrendous. You know, you've got the obvious things like theft, absenteeism. You know, you get a call at 5 o'clock in the morning saying somebody can't come in because they're blah 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 sickness or whatever, and all of a sudden, you know, you've got a big shift to cover and nobody's to cover it. You know, or if you've got a manager that you're relying on for your one day off, and suddenly he hands in his notice because the guy down the road's offered him a bit more money, and you know you're back to working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is the biggest individual problem, other than obviously covering your overheads and making a profit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you know, I love mom and pop businesses. Family businesses work for me. Well, NCASS is living proof of that as well, isn't it? Um, you know, at least you can trust your family, and you know they're not going to pull a flanker on you. I mean, we had all sorts of problems with staff. You know, we had to put cameras into sandwich bars and all sorts of stuff because people, one for you, one for me, and into their apron pockets and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it can get really, really problematic. I mean, and you know, especially the current climate, you know, people are very short of cash, and I think for me the big issue with staffing is when it's your business, you just care so much about it, and you know, you're constantly thinking about it, and it's just everything to you. Whereas when you bring in a staff member, and quite often on reasonably low pay, not that should necessarily matter, but you know, they're not going to have that same commitment as you would have, and make the same decisions in the right way as you would. Is that something that you've come across?
Oh, yeah, all the time. I mean, yeah, you do get good people. Don't get me wrong. Everybody's not bad, but you know, you occasionally get a manager who's gonna not do a great job for you, and when you're not there, there's all sorts of stuff going on behind the scenes, whether it's health and safety or food safety, or just plain pilfering or bad management. There's so many things that can go wrong, and you have to be so attentive. I had a brother-in-law who had a pub, and you know, the staff problems he had, just absolutely horrendous. People swapping optics over for their own and all sorts of stuff.
Wow.
It's yeah.
So with you know, at the moment, obviously, we're going through quite challenging times, and resilience and pivoting are two words that are coming up. Building resilience into your business and things like that. But it's something that we've always been quite confident that mobile caterers are, you know, agile, adaptable, resilient. I mean,
Yeah.
something that you've come across? Is it something that the job lends itself to, or is it something that
that is the best part of it, isn't it? It is resilient. The market is resilient for mobile catering, for want of a better word. But also, you can up sticks and move somewhere else, or you can not do that event again, or you've got total flexibility. And the worst that can happen is you lose a few quid. As long as you don't buy at a ridiculous price, whether it's new or second hand. Very rarely do these things lose a lot of money. They're like camper vans these days. I wanted to buy a camper van, and the prices for a second-hand camper van are just crazy. And it's the same with trailers and mobile catering units in general, no matter whether they're mobiles or trailers or motorized units or whatever. But the only thing I didn't do is do market stalls. I kind of just couldn't get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and put a market stall together.
I mean, I think breaking down is probably the most brutal thing you can do
that's
after a hard
part.
shift.
Yeah.
I don't envy anyone doing that. I quite enjoy having a beer and watching people do it these days. I mean, one thing that you said is to get into it kind of snowballs. How important is it to develop relationships with other caterers and to learn from them and also take advice from a trade association? I mean, I think one thing that really struck me when I started at NCASS, it was just 4 of us in a garage really, was how much we cared about our customers and how it was just a given that you give everything and that you're here to help and you listen and you try and solve problems with them. I mean, how much of that has continued and how important is it that we kind of work together through these difficult times?
I mean, in all business, it's all about contacts, isn't it? It's all about keeping your contacts warm. Doesn't matter whether it's your customer or whether it's colleagues in the industry or potential employers. It's about keeping that whole contact base warm, for want of a better word. It is what makes business grow. People want to do business with people. That's why I've always said, with startups, you need a backstory, because if you've got a backstory, then people will relate to that. Why would I go and buy my food from one trader rather than another one? It's because I like them. They're friendly. They've got a great story to tell. Providing the food's equal quality, that's where you go. Yeah.
I mean, have a why. That's one thing I've started to ask caterers now, especially startups, when they come to me. It's just like, what's your why? Why are you doing this? What's the reason for it? And it's kind of elevator pitch time, isn't it, really? But I think that there's a good reason why everyone has got into this business, and it's their reason, and they should be comfortable and confident talking about it. And I think that people want to find that connection with an individual, with a human, and if they come into your burger van or your street food stall or your coffee shop or restaurant, then quite often they're coming back and back and back, and it's that human connection, it's that hospitality that's bringing them back time and time again. Obviously the food is important, the drink is important, but I think that human connection is absolutely vital. Do you think
especially if you're in fixed site premises or somewhere where people, repeat business is an issue, like a roadside trade, repeat business is your lifeblood, the same as a cafe or a restaurant. Repeats are what it's all about.
Well, I mean, I think that's the same for any business, really, isn't it? If it's far easier to keep a customer than it is to find a new one. And, if you can keep your customers happy, then hopefully they'll keep coming back. So, I mean, is there anything that you think that industry could be doing more to sort of work together to get through these problems? So obviously, we've been doing a lot of lobbying on behalf of the mobile and the independent sector, because both the small restaurants and the mobile caterers have missed out on a lot of support from the government that have been available to other businesses. Is there anything more that businesses could be doing or should be doing to work together?
I mean, it's all about, again, keeping those contacts going, isn't it? Because when one opportunity opens, there's usually some others behind it somewhere. So it's keeping your contacts warm. It's just keeping your eyes peeled for opportunities all the time. I don't know, but certainly when we were catering, there was always opportunities. The problem was actually turning a few of them down, which you didn't really want to do. But it's about just keeping your eyes peeled. There are opportunities out there. There's still plenty of them. And some of them are probably a bit less obvious, but it's a bit about lateral thinking and keeping your head up. Don't get down because you have a bad day or a bad week. Everybody has a bad day and a bad week. It's a fact of life. Doesn't matter what business you're in. Um, it's about once you do have a bad week, it's when your back's against the wall. That's the time to really stand up and look around you and see what's going on and talk to your mates and talk to your business contacts. There's always something you can do, and that's the beauty of the mobile side of things. There is always somewhere you can go. It might not make you a fortune, but at least it keeps the wolf from the door. It pays the bills. That was always my attitude. As long as this thing breaks even, I'll stick it out for a few weeks, and then we'll make a decision whether we stay with it or not. But there's always something you can do, and definitely NCASS. I would say this, wouldn't I? But I think we do provide an invaluable service in terms of being able to keep people advised of what's going on and what opportunities are available and what could be available. Things are changing rapidly. I notice Solihull, our local council, where I live, have just opened up opportunities for fixed site premises to take over pavement space. Now, that's pretty unheard of. And what that means is ultimately the restaurants will pull back into themselves. I'm sure they will, but people have become more and more used to being able to sit on a pavement space like you do abroad, even with traffic roaring past you at 40 miles an hour, and drink a cup of coffee or have a beer. Things
Yeah,
are changing.
I think that's a really interesting point. I was just about to move on to actually. I mean, did you have were you licensed when you opened your burger van?
No. No, I was,
So,
these were desperate times. We just literally rocked up on the side of a road, pulled it half off the road and half onto the curb. It was a bit of space. There was it was opposite an industrial park on an access road, and there was some green land opposite, which is now built on, but wasn't then. And we just operated like that, and nobody bothered us for five years, I think it was, by the time we gave it up.
so I was chatting to a solicitor, barrister recently about licensing. Hopefully, he's going to come and do a little webinar with us in the next couple of weeks. But it's been very unclear as to whether people can actually go out and trade. And I think a lot of people have tried to err on the side of caution, but actually, there are opportunities for people to go out and trade if they need to, if they want to. But it's actually about engaging with their local authority and understanding the rules and the regulations that are out there. Do you think that that's? I mean, obviously, you think that that's a possibility. I mean, do you think that there is scope for thousands of mobile caterers to actually find a piece of private land or get permission to use some council land and actually get out there and trade?
Well, as I understand it, unless the laws change drastically, the only people that are empowered to actually move you on are the police. And so there's no harm in actually. I probably shouldn't be saying this live on air, but almost chancing it a little bit. It depends how desperate you are. If I haven't got any money to feed the kids, other than anything criminal, I would do it. Nothing would stop me. I need to feed my kids and pay the mortgage. And so occasionally you just have to take a chance. And the worst that can happen is they ask you to move on. They're not going to put you in prison for trading somewhere where you shouldn't, unless you're causing a massive traffic accident or huge tailbacks. I mean, you're not going to go and do on a slip road on a motorway. I mean, that'd be crazy. But access roads to industrial estates and areas like that, where they need food, or they did. Whether the industrial estates are a good bet at the moment with so many businesses being on furlough and so on, I don't know, but there are opportunities, and there are more and more city centres realising that they've got, as city centres have emptied out because people working from home, then the councils are going to be more and more interested on opening up spaces to bring caterers in to at least provide some revenue and some activity over a weekend, in the hope that that will pull people back longer term into their offices and stuff.
So using mobile catering and I guess to some degree street food as placemaking. So bringing people back into city centres or town centres to dwell there and spend some time and some money there and in a distanced way meet some friends, I guess. I mean, I think there's definitely scope for that. Also, the new acronym WFH is being bandied around, which is work from home. I believe 49% of the workforce are currently working from home. which means that there's potentially a lot more capacity out in the burbs in terms of kind of taking your food to people. So, whereas in the past, or until the very recent past, the city centres were the places to be for restaurants and cafes and food to go businesses, near big train terminuses and lots of central business districts, near the offices, near the tourists, near the day trippers. And obviously that's kind of ground to a halt a little bit, or quite significantly, in the last couple of months. So, do you think there's scope for people offering catering from the suburbs,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just that you need to trade, from the specific spot where you are. Of course, the one thing most people have been doing, certainly we have, is we've been ordering, takeaways, deliver in. And there's no reason why a friend of mine's got a pizza operation. He does weddings, and he just runs a pizza business, as a separate business, and does deliveries. He's got his son doing deliveries on in a small car, and basically they make pizza to order. Same as any of the other major pizza operators do it, but better quality. Using high quality ingredients. He's built up a whole business around it now.
Yeah. And we find a lot of people actually kind of were forced to changing how they do things, but then actually quite liked what they're doing, and we're making some quite good money of switching up their businesses. So it's always worth considering. I mean, one of the I guess the big question for hospitality in the next 12 months is rent. If only half of the office workers are going into work, if the tourists aren't there, if the theatres aren't open and so on, are the commercial rents in city centres for restaurants and bars and hotels and hospitality businesses in general? I mean, I personally now believe that they're massively overpriced across the board. Would you agree with that? And do you think that that will lead to businesses kind of handing the keys back and going mobile? Sort of restaurateurs just saying, I can't pay you rent for the 6 months or 4 months that I was closed, and the following 6 months where I had to work at 40% capacity, I can't work. I'm going mobile. What do you think the scope is for that?
I think there's plenty of examples of that actually happening. How longer term that will be is questionable, because I think once you've worked on fixed premises to then go mobile, it's actually a lot harder. So I think once these landlords finally realise that they have been charging rents that nobody can no longer afford, and bring them down to a level just to fill space, then I think the restaurants will come back. At least a high percentage of them will. But I think in the short term, there are no doubt that there are restaurateurs that are now using more accessible means, cheaper means of actually applying their wares.
Yeah, but I think in terms of if you can't afford your rent, that could be a good way of. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of legal implications or financial implications about handing back your keys in such a way. But I think that for a lot of independent businesses that don't have the same kind of influence, shall we say, as like the chain restaurants who could, I think we had one big chain recently, a week or so ago, closed 20 stores because they couldn't get rent reductions. And moved on, kind of thing. But obviously, if you've only got one restaurant, that's a lot harder to do. So, do you think that is an option? Do you think people will be forced to do it basically by the landlords?
I think the economy will force them to do it. I just would like to say one word of caution before you take on a lease. Just be absolutely certain you know what you're doing, because you are responsible for that lease unless the law's changed. And I don't think it has. Even if you then sublet it to somebody else, until you've gone 2 people down the chain, you are still responsible for paying that lease. So leasehold premises do come with a lot of ties, and please be aware of that. I know lots of people have gone into trouble because they thought they got out of the lease, sublet it to somebody else, or signed a lease over to somebody else. They've gone bust, and they suddenly find actually they're still responsible for the next 10 years. And that's enough to give you a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
So a word of caution there. Pardon?
I mean, 10 years is a long time for any restaurant as well.
It's a crazy lease, but the big city centres want minimum 5 years, and sometimes 25-year leases. It just depends. As they get more and more desperate, obviously things will get easier. But word of caution before you think about a lease, just check everything out.
But what would you do if you're already in one and you need to get out of one? Or is there much that can be done? Or
There isn't a lot that can be done. You can try and talk to the landlords. Some will listen. Some will give you rent reductions. Some won't. The majority, from what I hear of the big boys, won't do it at the moment. But you're legally stuck with it. And then the only alternative is some nasty things like bankruptcy and insolvency and stuff like that. And then you have to make sure you're a limited company. Don't go as a sole trader taking on a lease, whatever you do. That's absolute no.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that you kind of touched on it earlier, really, of the big changes that are going on. I think that if I was looking to sign a lease in the next year, it'd be 6 months maximum. I think you're looking at I'll do a pop-up to save your shopping centre, not I want a 5-10 year lease to make this restaurant work or whatever it may be. I just think there's too much uncertainty for that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's obviously there's lots of opportunities out there that people might not have been picking up on as well. So I mean, we've seen all of the beaches packed on the news, the staycations and internal tourism around the UK with people less able to fly abroad for their holidays and things like that. If you were trading now, what kind of opportunities would you be looking at? Because obviously, the more traditional ones are limited at the moment. What would you?
Yeah, that's the sort of thing I'd be looking at, where places where they've had cafes, but it's not economical to reopen because of social distancing, but they've still got customers. Garden centres are classics for that, because they've usually got small cafes. A friend of mine just opened one at an adventure park, a small adventure park, where again, the cafe was closed because of the same reason. So they've just put a coffee and donut trailer. All of a sudden, they're doing £300 to £400 a day, which is pretty good money in these times, when he was really got his back against the wall because he was a wedding caterer and basically had a whole year's events cancelled. Just literally within a month, they lost a year's worth of work.
Yeah, I mean, when the function industry kind of collapsed in the spring, it was absolutely brutal. I was sat with a caterer, just I think we met up for a coffee, and his phone was just going bing, 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 and it was just events or private functions just cancelling with him.
Yeah.
And it was brutal to watch. And we're going to have a lot of members that would have been in that kind of situation.
Yeah.
So I think the function caterers should be looking for opportunities beyond their normal area of work.
Yeah. You just have to think outside the box at the moment. It has been brutal for many of them, but I think once it comes back, I think it'll come back fast and furious. People are not going to put off weddings indefinitely. They're just looking for different locations, and okay, they might be scaled a bit, but I think it's gone up to 30 now. I think you can have a wedding and a funeral, something like that. I can't remember. But as soon as those restrictions are lifted, whenever that will be, and nobody really knows, but as soon as they are, then the old Friday and Saturday weddings will grow to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday weddings, because there simply isn't enough venues that are licensed to do it. So they're going to have to multiplex up the space that they have got.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, it's how can you pivot what you're doing if your normal scenario is not available to you. One of the things that I've been saying for the last few months is this year is the year that we do the things we have to do, and next year hopefully we get to go back to do the things we want to do. I think that there's been a lot of function caterers, street food, festival caterers. There's so many mothball festival caterers, but realistically could be out there trading on some level if they wanted to and if they felt comfortable to do so. If you're on private land, you're pretty much good to go, as I understand it. So if you can get an arrangement with a private landowner, then you can do that. And obviously, there's if you're working with people like, I think like campsites are a massive one at the moment, but also any kind of tourist attraction, or as Bob was saying, or leisure activities, that they've all had their cafes shut. So looking into those kinds of places could be a real
National Trust is another good one apparently at the moment, because they're continually on and off whether they're open, excuse me, or not open. But they've all got catering facilities, most of which again are too small to get social distancing to make it economical. So a lot of those now are looking at different options and putting on little events of their own, like outdoor cinemas and things like that, where you can socially distance. The problem is now we're going into autumn, aren't we? And our traditional British winter, whilst it's milder than it used to be, and it's not the sort of thing that most people want to sit outside for 4 or 5 hours. So we got to be quite inventive as to what we do to keep businesses surviving through the winter period.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there could be there's been a lot of talk, obviously, about alfresco Britain. I think you've got to raise the big issue with alfresco Britain, as in the British weather. This was an initiative started by the Department of Communities, Housing and Local Government, and they wanted to, basically, it came down to the fact that hospitality and retail businesses needed more space in order to operate. So the idea was to open up onto the pavement, to allow those businesses to open up onto the pavements outside, possibly look at things like road closures, pedestrianisation, that kind of thing. And we actually tried to get mobile catering included in that piece of legislation. It was called the Business Planning Bill. But because we didn't have fixed premises, as in sort of rate-paying businesses, we couldn't get pavements for mobiles. But obviously our independent coffee shops and restaurants and cafe members can all apply for those pavement licenses. But from that, we did get some assurances from various different local government, or various different government departments, that opportunities would be made available for mobile caterers as well. So, I mean, what would your thoughts be on that, in terms of how do you actually go and secure one of these opportunities? They're not going to fall on your lap, are they?
No, they're not. There's things that you've really got to keep your eye on, and probably pester the local council if you can get somebody to talk to you about what's becoming available. As I say, it only came on the news, I think, yesterday or the day before, about Solihull allowing pavement spaces, and guess who were the first ones to apply for it? It was our little friend Mr. Weatherspoon, on both his pubs in Shirley and Solihull. So if you need to be quick on these things, but I think the councils, from what I hear, are being quite fair in that they're not just giving it over to the big brands. I think there are going to be opportunities for small players, providing you've got the right opportunity, the right operation to fulfil what they need.
Yeah,
what they're not going to want is lots of smelly old burger vans, stuck everywhere, because it's just not. It just doesn't fit most councils' profiles these days, does it? You need to be doing something nicely. Good food, a good outfit.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, absolutely, and I think that if there's already a lot of fast food on the high street, then putting more fast food on that high street is probably not going to be that profitable for you, or be welcome. But if you can offer something different, or be away from the other businesses that are trying to make a go of it, then that could be the way forward. So I think Portland in America is probably one of the most successful places for street food and for food trucks and food carts and things like that. And that's a place where they have a rule saying you can't be within, I think it's 300 or 400 yards of a restaurant. And I think if people kind of take that approach, looking for car parking spaces, private land, away from the main drags, but offer something really interesting that people will, maybe go a little bit further than the beaten track to find.
Pub car parks are always a good one. Pubs that are too small to put on food for whatever reason or another, get into a pub car park and you've got good passing trade, and also the opportunity to feed the punters, and the pub makes a few quid on the side as well, because they've all struggled because they've been shut down. I'm not talking about the big breweries here. I'm talking about independents more than anything else.
Amazing. I think that in terms of making the most of these payment licenses, and also actually putting on events and markets. I mean, we had some major concessions made through the Department of Business, to allow people to put on markets. So now it should be far easier for the local authorities, but also for private enterprises to put on their own markets across England, certainly, possibly to a lesser degree in Scotland. Wales is currently a bit problematic on that front because they are all the different nations are managing this COVID response differently. So we're not quite there in Wales yet. But do you think that there's scope for businesses to club together and to put on their own markets, put on their own little street food markets, that kind of thing?
I think that's the future, to be honest. We've seen it happen in London, haven't we, with outfits called like Curb and so on, and other places around the country with street food collectives. It's got a double factor, hasn't it? One, you're a group together, so you've got some degree of security. Your problems are halved if they're shared. There's all sorts of reasons why that is a good working model. And even more so in these particular circumstances, because if there's half a dozen of you can go as traders, can go to a local authority and say, look, there's this space here, can we use it, can we get a license for a small event? You've got more chance than going just as a one-off trader. I think that's the future.
So I was at an event on Friday, a street food event in Birmingham. It was socially distanced, although what was it we're calling it? Low density market. And it had 60 tables marked out. You had distancing marked on the floor for all of those tables. They could, I think, seated 6 people per table, but from maximum 2 households. And they were bringing in people for, I think it was an hour and a half or 2-hour sessions at a time. I think over the course of the day they could have, over 1,000 people in there.
Yep.
Do you think it's actually about reimagining events now?
Yeah, it's about rethinking, isn't it? I mean, I think the one business I'd love to be in now is probably Marquee Hire, because I think they're going to do brilliantly for the next few months, and with the heating as well. But yeah, I mean, that is definitely the way to go. And the beauty of doing it, where you've only got a time slot, is you're not going to get people sat there with a pint for the next 4 or 5 hours. They're going to actually, use the time they've got to actually do whatever it is they want to do. Whether it's food or drink, and they're going to be moved on unless they can buy a double slot or whatever. So I think it's a brilliant concept. It used to annoy the hell out of me in restaurants when they only gave you a 2-hour slot to have your meal. But yeah, I think I think it's the way forward, without a doubt.
I think that certainly your career was born out of adversity, if you like, in terms of mobile catering. And when I first started at NCASS over 10 years ago now, we were the country was in a recession,
Yep.
and the street food kind of appeared out of nowhere. In terms of these businesses just started popping up mostly in London, but they were happening in Leeds and Manchester and a few other places. The street food sector really kind of came out of that adversity. It came out of that, that people not having money, so and not really having, it was a cheap night out, really, wasn't it? Go spend and have a pint and a burger and that kind of thing. So, do you think that that kind of thing could happen again? Do you think that adversity actually could be of benefit to?
You know what, Mark? If we fell on hard times tomorrow, I would not think twice about starting up another catering operation, and it wouldn't be fixed site for all the reasons I've said. It would be trailer based or a mobile driven unit base or whatever it was, because it's so flexible and the risk is so low. Okay, you do need to you need to think before you move and go and spend 5 or 10 grand or 20 grand or whatever you've got to spend. You need to have some security into where at least you think you can start trading. But I wouldn't even give it a second thought. It's been so good to me over the years, until NCASS really got going. Even in the early days, if you remember when there was 4 of us in the office, I used to go off and do deliveries for Jean when she had a sandwich bar in Shirley. Quite often, if the drivers didn't turn up or whatever, I'd be out there flogging me wares, baguettes, bacon and egg baguettes down local industrial estate and all sorts of stuff. I loved it. It was said it was hard work. It was dirty work. Jean used to come home every night shattered and swear she'd never want to do another one, but she would. If we were pushed, she would do it again. And it's proven that recession time is the time when there are opportunities. And you don't go into deep depression. There are opportunities out there, and you can start up your own business with a few thousand quid. Doesn't have to be massive. You can scale it down or up depending on how much you want to put at risk, and it is very low risk. You will sell your kit if it doesn't work out in 6 months. I pretty much guarantee you could sell your kit for less than no more than 20% loss, and you've given it a go. Even if it doesn't work, give it a go. And if you really put your heart and soul into it, I've never known a catering business, where somebody's really put their heart and soul and thought out of the box. I've never seen one go bust in all my years of experience in this business.
Yeah, I mean, I think so were there any businesses that for you stand out from when you started out that were kind of game changers that kind of really hit the ground running and changed how things happened, changed how things worked? There's a lot of that when I kind of started, there was a lot of that in the street food scene, people coming through and just doing some pretty incredible things and have gone on to pretty dizzying heights. Were there any in your kind of generation that really?
Well, when we started off, it was still pretty basic. I mean, it was, burgers, fish and chips, pies, pasties, and all that sort of stuff. And then came along, the wonderful world of pizza and hog roast and all those things. And I don't think you have to be, super, super specialized. Don't get me wrong, I love the exotics, but I don't want to eat exotics every day. I can just about do a curry once a week or once a fortnight and enjoy it really, really well. But there are still opportunities for things like the basics, like pizza and hog roast, and okay, burgers have moved on a long way. Given the option now, I don't think I'd probably do burgers because I wouldn't be bothered doing that much mess with them. But messing with them, being so pedantic about how they were. In my day, I used to buy a box of 100% burgers from the cash and carry, and 100% beef burgers from the cash and carry. And yeah, cook them from frozen. Good old days.
There's a lot to be said.
We made serious profit out of them.
Yeah, I mean the margins in the frozen burgers are certainly more appealing.
But, the margin in pizzas is just phenomenal. The margin in coffee is phenomenal. People haven't stopped drinking coffee. They haven't stopped eating pizza. It's still all there. Hog roast is still as popular as ever, but the problem with hog roast is mainly an event based. You need a certain number of people to make it work. But there are still plenty of opportunities of different kinds of business. You don't have to be an expert in Thai catering or Asian catering or whatever. There's still we've got guys that just do chips, for goodness sake, but they do good chips. Hand cut, quality, triple cooked, proper chips. My idea of heaven.
I never really got the appeal of that, and then I tried some. I think it was Disco Fries in Birmingham, and it just absolutely blew the sauces and things I would put in with them. I surely that's what could possibly. It reminded me actually of the meat liquor or the meat wagon when that first opened. It's going, what could possibly be so exciting about a burger? And then eating, going, oh yeah, really got that. I really got that with the fries recently, which is it's always good to be surprised by food. But I think we're very much in danger of overrunning here. I think we already have possibly, but so I'm going to bring up that one little thing from Holland.
You swore you'd never do that.
I'm going to use it. There are many things I won't talk about from that trip, but we were invited to Holland too, and part of it was actually you were asked to do a talk at a music festival. And I think it's been the first time you've been to a festival in a couple of years.
Yeah, it was.
And it was a really interesting talk. He had quite a rude name, but the basis of it was people can learn more from the mistakes that others have made than the success stories. So despite the fact that you've been a highly successful caterer and trade association owner and much more, what were is there one or more mistakes or things that you made in your life that F-ups, if you like, that you really learned from, that you could share some knowledge with our viewers?
Yeah, I think at that particular talk it was called F-ups, wasn't it? And and I think I listed about 6. The one that I think is probably the one that's caused me more trouble than anything is over trading, just getting too big, thinking and growing too fast. Just do it nice and steady, every step measured. Don't be afraid of taking risks and chances, but should always be measured. I think that's the biggest one. Just don't overstep the mark. It's so tempting when you get a bit of success to think you can multiply it. Catering is actually not that easy to multiply. It's easy to set up, it's easy to get going, you can make a very good living out of it, but start wanting to take over and do 2, 3, 4 times, you then come to this big staff problem in that you're reliant on people, and people are the weakest link.
Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine in a caterer, no longer a caterer actually, but a very good caterer for many years. He scaled up. I think he took like 3 or 4 units, went from 2 to 5 units, and he's very confident that he was going to do really well at the festivals and shows. And I said to him, well, you know, surely that's a massive risk. He said, well, no, because I'm working at all of them, I'm hedging my bets. But you know, if you have 2 bad weekends because of the rain or whatever, then that could, you know, if you've got 5 units out, that could pretty much. And it pretty much
the other big thing is don't pay big rents, whether it's fixed site, lease costs, or whether it's events. If somebody's asking you for more money than you can afford to lose for a day, don't pay it.
Yeah,
don't pay it. You because the day you do that will be the day you lose.
I think that is a great bit of advice to end it on. If you can't afford to lose it, don't gamble it. Bob, thank you so much. You've been really interesting and entertaining as ever. And yeah, I'm sure that everyone watching at home has had a great time listening to your stories and your wisdom. So thank you very much, mate. And I'll see you very soon.
Okay, take care. God bless everyone, and be successful, and mostly be healthy and happy. Thanks for everything. Take care.
Cheers, guys.